Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome this evening's guest moderator from New York Magazine, Patty Greco, and tonight's guest, Kurt Sutter.
I'm so glad you're all so happy to see me. Hi. Thank you for doing this, Kurt.
My pleasure. Thank you.
So we're 9 episodes into season 6.
Yes, we are. Yeah.
Tara has spent this entire season so far deceiving Jax. Jax finally knows about it. What I want to know is, did you always know from the beginning of the show that you were going to pull this couple so far apart? And if so, does that mean you think that they're incompatible ultimately?
Wow, that's really deep.
I'm getting deep.
I was just expecting 50 Shades of Grey questions, so that's all I'm really prepared for. No, I think my intent with Tara was always that sort of the education of an old lady, you know, and Gemma really being her coach and mentor to a certain extent, and really showing the evolution of Tara, at least over those first 5 seasons, of her slowly becoming, closer and closer to perhaps what Gemma had become. And so in playing out that arc, you have to throw it up against, Jax, and how would Jax respond to that, and how would she use those skills to protect herself. And that's really what she's doing now, is essentially learning everything, or using everything that she's learned from Gemma to, and applying them to her own circumstances, which is, okay, I feel threatened, I'm not sure what to do, how do I protect my family? And now I need to go to those extreme measures to do that. I think the biggest struggle for both of them in all of this is the fact that they do love each other, and I think the betrayal and the heartache for both of them is knowing that they've been driven to this point of having to do this. Right. Tara feeling like, that it had to come to this, and Jax really feeling, to a certain extent, somewhat responsible for her being driven to that place. So,
and I'm glad you say that Tara felt like she had to do this, because I feel like I want to defend Tara. There are a lot of Tara haters right now. What do you say in response to them? Are they being fair? And I'm also curious how Maggie Siff, who plays Tara, has responded to the backlash.
Yes, I'm always somewhat surprised at the extreme reaction of the fan base, because you don't have that awareness when you're in the process of putting it out there. So you don't really think, okay, how is this going to land, or how is this going to be perceived? You just sort of try to move through with organic story. And, and it's hard for me, because no matter what my characters do, I always feel like I have them rooted in some sense of humanity and understanding. So when we, by example, we did this screening in New Jersey last night for this Sandy benefit, So we watched episode 10, which will air this Tuesday, with, like 1,500 screaming New Jersey fans. And, it was just like watching a movie in the hood. They were just, kill that bitch! It was just sort of like, so it really, I was like, oh, okay. Perhaps, so there's, but I do think that there are people like yourself that, beyond the betrayal of it, I think there's that sense of, absolute sadness that this person is being driven to such extreme measures to protect herself and her family. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. To see her unravel that way and become that person is really quite sad.
Here's what I want to know, though. Why doesn't she say to Jax, your mom helped kill your dad, basically? Like, when is that shoe going to drop? And why isn't Gemma more nervous that it will?
I think, to a certain extent, I feel like Tara is smart enough to know that she would need like the tangible proof of all that. Do you know what I mean? And if you go back and you look at what she does know, it really is, you know, in those letters, it's suggested, it's speculation. It's not like tangible proof. So I feel like, I mean, at a certain point, yes, I think if you know, if push came to shove, she might engage in that. But I also, because every time we go back and we look at that and we look at what that information is and we think, well, how would she use this? Can she use this? And we look at how it would play out. We have to give Tara the intelligence to realize, well, how is this going to play out? And is it going to turn on me or work against me? You know, I think what you saw in, I think it was last week's episode, where Gemma sort of reveals to Nero that truth. I mean, that's really, I mean, for me, that really is the truth. That's not Gemma sort of spinning or soft selling. I mean, that, you know, that really is the extent of it. It's like, I don't think she pulled the trigger. I don't think she came up with the plan, but I do think she ultimately gave Clay the blessing to, you know, move forward, you know. And as she said, I don't think she's ever said that out loud to anyone, you know.
This isn't a question, but I just want to say that Colette is the worst. Colette is the person who had sex with Jax, everyone, and she's the worst. So, I mean, not the actress, just the fact that she did this. Okay, so last week's episode also was the Clay Pussy Sermon episode, and that was pretty amazing. I want to know how you even came up with the Pussy Sermon, one, and in general, how you come up with your kind of out there ideas. Are they just in your head, or do you have these sort of dark sources?
I had 12 years of Catholic schooling, and that'll do it. No, you know, it was difficult because we, you know, Clay wasn't in a couple of episodes, and we had written scenes that included him in jail, and ultimately they didn't make it to the final drafts because they always sort of felt like what they were, which is, hey, don't forget about this guy. And they didn't feel organic and part of the storyline. So we really let, you know, what was going on with him sort of drop out a little bit. So it was fun, you know, to reintroduce his arc coming into the last, you know, third of the season. And we had this idea that, you know, he needed to, he was going to get the phone. The only place he could get the phone to make those calls was in the psych ward. So then it was like, well, now we can do anything we want because all he has to do is go fucking crazy. So, and then yeah, I have a buddy of mine who's actually a preacher and goes into county jail and out in L.A. and does sermons and stuff. So he would tell me some crazy stories, and not that anyone ever did the Pussy the Redeemer speech to him, but that sort of became that character. I thought, well, that's an interesting character, and maybe Clay goes off on that guy, and then the rest is just things that went wrong when I was a child.
You tweeted recently that you're going to write JT's full manuscript, The Life and Death of Sam Crow. Have you started writing that yet? I mean, in its completion, and how is that going to play into season 7, the final season?
It's not. The plan is to, and I have when I did the initial sort of document Bible for the show, I included sort of how I saw that book in terms of what it was, and have like chapter headings and sections that I think are in the book. And I don't think it's, you know, the great thing about JT's manuscript is that, you know, we sort of refer to it during different points of the series as you know, just kind of a I think Jax at one point refers to it as, you know, like a crazy diatribe and MC love story. You know what I mean? It's sort of like all over the place. So, which basically gives me the license to do anything I want. So, but I have the chapter headings and I sort of know what I want it to be. And then I'll probably work with somebody to help me sort of pound some of it out. But the plan is for me to start that over the hiatus and start putting drafts together and work with an editor, and then to release it on the day of the final episode of the series. So when the last episode airs, the manuscript will be available.
Right.
So.
Which is why I thought it might play into season 7, because we spoke once before, and you said that the Redwood original would play a big role in the 7th season. So.
I was lying.
But
no, I mean, I think it plays. I don't know if it plays an integral part in terms of story, but I think for me, all of that legacy of Jack's is really, it's what constantly pushes him forward. We have and here's a little spoiler for you, but there's a scene in this week's episode where, we see him in the beginning after the clubhouse explodes. We see him carrying out pieces of JT's bike, and we sort of see what happened to all those pieces in this week's episode. So, the metaphor of him still trying to put together his father's legacy after it's been blown up, you know what I mean, is still sort of, whether it's conscious or unconscious, you see him still wanting to or needing to figure out what all that is. And I still think that impacts him a great deal. I still think he thinks about it, especially, when Gemma talks about how everything that happened with JT is to a certain extent being repeated with Jack's. That JT sort of went through the same challenges with the Irish 15 years ago, 20 years ago, when he tried to get out as Jackson. You know what I mean? So we don't do flashbacks on the show just because I think it pulls us out of the reality. So what I'm able to do is sort of allow history to repeat itself to kind of tell those tales, Right.
I was actually going to ask if you don't do flashbacks because you dislike them in general, or?
No, I think flashbacks are, I think it's a great storytelling device. But I always felt like, because of the grittiness of this show, and sorry, I fucking hate that word, because of the, it's just so misused. The tone of this show and the reality of this show, I just felt like, when you do flashbacks, you're asking the audience to unplug from where they are and the engagement of that moment. Do you know what I mean? And I feel like that's part of the allure of the show, is that, you feel part of. And to do flashbacks, I think, is a device that, sort of puts you sort of outside of it. You're very aware, and now I'm watching a TV show and I'm seeing something else that happened a while ago, and now I'm back. So, I don't know, it was just a conscious style choice.
What are some of your TV writing pet peeves that you see in other shows?
Oh man, I could get in so much trouble for that question. Here's what I would say. I was having a conversation, I won't say a name, but I flew out on the plane with somebody to New York, and who had done a lot of network TV, and we were having a conversation about network TV. And I think what happens with network TV sometimes is that it's and not that there's not very talented people writing it and producing it, and even at the networks. I know people in levels, high levels of creative decision making in the networks, and I know they're bright and talented people. But the mandate there is to sort of dumb it down to the middle, because you, for better or for worse, you're really creating for the lowest common denominator. Do you know what I mean? So what ends up happening is things just sort of get diluted and simple. So I watch network shows sometimes, and I'll see like a really good story, and then I'll hear it, and then I'll see the network notes. You know, I'll see them sort of, you know, layering it with exposition because they're afraid people aren't going to understand. I'll see them, you know, repeating scenes or having a character say something once, twice, 3 times, just in case people, or taking a story down a trajectory that they know will feel more comfortable when you can clearly see that perhaps a writer or somebody wanted it to go someplace else. So, you know, I get frustrated with that just because, as you know, you see the potential for something to be different and good, and then ultimately it just gets killed by that need, you know, for it to be middle of the road, you know. And the joke is, you know, at the networks, it's like we're looking for new and fresh and exciting, and they're really not. They're just looking for, you know, the same old shit in a prettier package, in a different package. You know, they just want to, really what they want is a new, fresh, you know, trailer each year, and they don't really want new product, you know.
Are people scared?
And I will never, obviously, work at a network television.
Right.
After tonight.
Are people scared to give you notes?
Why would you ask that?
I don't know. You don't seem very scary to me, except on Twitter.
No, you know, I think I have a great relationship with 20th, Fox 21, and FX, and they've, you know, I get notes from them now, and I can hear the staff meetings about how to give me the note, and so everything is, it's fantastic. Everything is couched. It's like Jeopardy. Everything is couched in a question, you know. What if we had a question? And you know, so I have to listen to the questions and go, okay, all right, that's the note. That's, you know what I mean, and sort of decipher. But it's, you know, and that's what seems to work best. But the great thing is that they really like the show at the network. So they're as excited to see the new episodes and to read the new scripts as, you know, as anybody. So that helps, you know, when you have people that are actually engaged in what you're doing, is a big help. So I wouldn't say they're afraid. I think they know that perhaps I have a big personality, you know. But fuck, they deal with Ryan Murphy. How much bigger could I be than Ryan Murphy? I know Ryan Murphy. I am tame compared to Ryan Murphy.
Speaking of Ryan Murphy, do you watch American Horror Story?
You know, I don't. You know, it's and I know it's a great show, and Ryan really is a good friend of ours, and I don't just mean that in like the Hollywood way, but. You know, it's just not my milieu. You know, I'm just not really a horror guy, and there's very little TV that I actually can watch. You know, just because of my schedule, and there's only a few shows that I really do watch or try to, or I actually enjoy watching. You know, but I think Katey's watched it a couple of seasons, but I don't.
I was curious in part because it's just when I watch it, I'm like, I can't believe this man also does Glee, and I'm not saying it.
Right.
So I wonder if you would ever do a show that's so different than Sons of Anarchy, so not violent, focused more on the comedy. Do you ever think about that?
Yeah, I mean, clearly I've carved out a little niche for myself, doing The Shield and then coming into Sons, and it's you know, it's an area I'm obviously pretty comfortable in, but I really try to, you know, there's a lot of, you know, people will laugh not for the right reasons at this, but you know, there's a lot of humor in Sons. See, there's a lot of dark humor, and that's some of my, you know, I love writing that stuff, you know. So I would, you know, I'd like to try to write a comedy. In the past, though, every time I try to like write something funny, by the second act, it's just horrible. People are just dead, and
or it's perverted,
it's just sort of like, it's funny to me, and then people read it and go, what do I do with this? You know, a laugh track? I don't know. What do you?
What is your writing process like? Are you a morning writer, a fast writer, a cranky writer?
Yeah, that's my name. It's my nickname, Fast and Cranky. I don't know what that means. I have a couple. You know, I tend to rewrite in the morning. I'll do a shift in the morning, and that's sort of when I'm sort of more alert, and I tend to do a lot of rewriting in the morning, and then I do a shift at night after everybody goes to bed, and that's when I tend to break more story, and I guess a little bit more of the creative stuff happens at night. Maybe all the weird shit happens at night. I don't know, you know. And in the morning I read it and go, what? Right, you know.
You've said that you have a kind of end game in mind. Do you have moments, or how often do you have moments, if at all, where you freak yourself out or second guess or think that maybe you should tweak something or change the trajectory?
I don't, you know, and not to sound like I think everything that rolls out of my printer is gold, but I think it doesn't serve the creative process to second guess, you know. I feel like once it's out there because it's supposed to be out there. And, you know, so I don't really look back and go, wow, I wish I did that differently, you know. There are things in the process that have happened that I wish happened differently. In fact, we were just having discussions about, I just directed the finale, and I'm in the process of doing that cut, and it's a little long. So we're trying to figure out, can we actually do a 2-hour finale, and how does that break down? And then they suggested, well, in season 4, you split the finale into 2 episodes, and that's something I wish I never did. I feel like that was a huge mistake. I felt like an episode is an episode; it's a little movie unto itself, and I felt by ultimately splitting that episode in 2, it hurt both of those episodes. So I wish I had never done that. But in terms of story, no, I really feel like things happen pretty much organically, and when it's out there, it feeds, I feel, you know, the trajectory of where we're going, and so I try not to look at it in terms of, you know, I wish I didn't do that, you know, other than wishing I'd killed Otto in season 2.
Because you didn't like the stress of playing a character?
It was just such a horrible, it took like so long to put on that fucking eye, and it's just sort of, it's like, really, you know. It always seems like a good idea at the beginning of the season, and then like I get the call sheet, and I'm like, really? I gotta get up at 6 a.m. to like put the eye on, really? So.
Didn't you auction off his tongue last night, or sell it for a Sandy release?
We tried to. We actually, this is so, I'm such a whore, but we actually, you know, we have these little, we have these little trading cards. Well, not little trading cards, they're trading cards. And they wanted to put a piece of swag inside the trading cards. So I said, well, let's just chop up the tongue. So if you buy the trading cards, and some of them, there's actually a little piece of Otto's tongue. So, you know, that'll be a big seller, clearly.
You have some sick fans.
That's true. That's
no
true.
offense, guys. Speaking of sick fans, it's now the Q&A portion for the audience. And this woman over here is going to take it over.
I said none from the second row.
Come on, you gotta give me a chance. That's kind of messed up. One of my questions is, don't get me wrong, I love my Men of Mayhem, and you have introduced like strong female characters like Gemma, or like this season I love CCH Pounder as the district attorney. But what about Women of Mayhem, by any chance? Because you know, you have broken barriers through what.
Well, here's the deal, and people ask that all the time, and they talk about the sort of misogynistic nature of the world, and the reality is this: if there were outlaw clubs that had women in them, that you know what I mean, and it was part of the reality of that environment, I would potentially write to it, but there's not. There really isn't. So I feel like to suddenly do that is going to feel like a writer trying to break a barrier, and that's not my job. It's not my job to break the barrier in terms of well, let's not, let's do this in TV now. Do you know what I mean? It's my job to tell the story and to sort of be organic to the world, and I try to do that by creating female roles that are strong within the parameters of that world, and that's really what I have to do. Now, if I'm writing a show that takes place in a different world where that happens, yeah, then I think you have the opportunity to do that. But staying true to that culture, it really is a somewhat misogynistic culture still, and until that changes, it really doesn't make sense for me to tell that. You know, it would be a lie. So.
Hi, Kurt. How are you?
Hi, Ann. How are you?
Good.
What's your name?
My name is Valerie, and today is my birthday, actually.
Happy
and
birthday,
this is the best
Valerie.
present is to be here and listening to you. I listen to the after shows that they have podcasts, and I love hearing everybody kind of break down the show. And a couple of things that I've been hearing, and I don't know how much credence there is to this, but with the season ending with next season, there's been talk of maybe some spin-offs of Sons, or maybe even a prequel to see how John Teller and Clay were back in the day. Is that something that you can talk about?
Yeah, I much to the chagrin of the network, I talk about it a lot, probably. I do. I would, you know, I had a sense of that, like, coming into third season of the show, when we were doing all the revealing a lot of the backstory that took place in Belfast, and I do. My plan is to, you know, we're putting out a lot of companion content, meaning we have the graphic novel we're doing now. The third issue is coming out. We're going to be doing novelization with actual full novels that are companion pieces in terms of they take place within our world in other charters, and members of the club that we all know will intersect with those worlds, so that they run parallel to the stories that are being told each week on the show. And the plan is to have that out there and continue with that after the series ends next season, to basically sort of keep the IP, the intellectual property, alive and current in people's minds. And then what I would love to do is let the mythology rest for a couple years, like a season or two, and then come back and do the first 9 and have it really be a period piece that takes place in the 60s, and these vets coming back from war. And so tonally it would be a different show, I think, but to tell the story of John Teller and Piney Winston coming back from Nam, and the reasons why they did all this initially, you know. Yeah, I'd love to do that. And we've had discussions about it, you know, creatively, and people seem open to it, but that's as far as it's gone at this point.
Hi, Kurt.
Hi.
I am a huge fan. I have a friend who couldn't be here who's a bigger fan.
What's
So
your
I just
name?
love you. Huh?
What's your name?
Rosa.
Hi, Rosa.
Hi. Okay, so my question is about Opie.
He's
Now,
dead.
I know. Your show fills me up with so much emotions. I laugh, I cry, I curse, I stomp around. You would think I'm living in the real place. Okay, so I know I'm kind of sad that Opie is gone. You know, because Jackson and Opie had such a great bonds, a great relationship, great friendship. Now, I was wondering what went through your minds when you actually was writing the scene for Opie's death.
You know, and I think I've talked about this before. The character of Opie initially was, the plan was to kill him at the end of season 1, and have that be the sort of trajectory that set Clay and Jax into motion into season 2. And we loved Ryan Hurst so much, and he brought so much pathos and it had a completely different take on the world than a lot of our other guys. And we loved the relationship that was happening between he and Jax, and it felt really real and organic. So we killed Donna instead, and much to Sprague's dismay. But And that was, so, and then we obviously, kept that relationship going. But we did, there was so much emotional wreckage that character had over those 3 seasons, between losing Donna, between losing Piney, and I felt like once Clay's betrayal was revealed, that ultimately I just didn't know how this guy could sit across from any of those guys at the table and have it feel real. Like, how can, I just didn't know what that felt like. And Ryan had played him with such pathos and such vulnerability, and I just didn't know where else to go with the character. And we had, Ryan and I had discussions, and it was, it was brutal, man, because he's a buddy of mine, and it was really sad. And I think Charlie's told this story before, but he, you'll when they did that death scene where he gets hit in the pipe, all the guys, all the other actors, even the ones that weren't in that scene, were on the other side of that glass, and he had requested that they be there in that moment. So it was really, it was deep, man. It was deep for those. It was really cathartic, and it was some heavy stuff. So it was very, emotionally, it was very difficult, and one of the most difficult creative decisions I've ever had to make. I have a huge poster in my office, and I have it there just because it's the death blow to Opie's head. It's just a giant Opie head with blood coming out, and it looks like a halo behind it. And I know it sounds graphic, but it's actually quite beautiful, and I have it there because it just sort of reminds me of, it just sort of humbles me sometimes when I think like what I'm doing, that it's all about me, you know what I mean? Because I see that, and I know the impact that it's had on those guys, my cast, my crew. Clearly I can see the impact that it's had on the fan base. So it's sort of like, it just reminds me that it's all, that ultimately it's all bigger than me, and that it's ultimately sort of my job to just sort of help service all that. You know what I mean? And it kind of flips it for me and reminds me of all that.
Hey, Kurt, big fan.
Hey, man.
Thanks. My first question is...
What's your name?
Mike.
Hey, Mike.
Nice to meet you. First, I know the Torek character was supposed to go all season.
Yeah.
Where was that going to go? Because that was totally a crazy scene, like Silence of the Lambs, him dancing ass naked. So where was his character going to go, and did that mean Otto was going to make it the whole season? And then my second question really quick is, if you had to cast somebody for JT now, who would that be?
Oh, that's interesting. Donald is a friend of mine, and we've been wanting to work together, and we've tried a couple seasons in the past, and things didn't work out. So, we brought him in, we introduced him last season, and yeah, my sense was everything that happened to that character was supposed to happen much later, including the Otto of it all. And it was supposed to happen around episode 8 or 9, because that's when I thought he was leaving to go do Vikings, and their schedule, I guess, they shoot that in Belfast or something, and there was weather or something, and his schedule got pushed up. So I realized I only had him for the 4 episodes. So we sort of had to crunch everything in. And then what we did, and this is what I mean by, not regretting stuff, like, because, we had brought in that character of Patterson, CCH Pounder's character, who was really, maybe only going to be on for a few episodes, and just that presence out there. But, as it turns out, what happened is a lot of that story then landed on her. Like, she picked up the burden of what he did. And it really, like, if I didn't tell people that, in terms of letting that character go, no one would. It's a fairly seamless transition, I feel, especially when you have a character like an actor like Cece. So that was sort of the plan, and she's organically sort of picked up that mantle, and it's become now personal for her, but in a completely different way. And I also sort of look at things like, we set up that character as being really out there, and then Donald made some really fantastic choices. So, I'm realizing that maybe, he was a 4-episode character. Like a little Torek goes a long way. Like how much naked ass dancing could we really have? You know, so or junky naked ass dancing. So you know, but so that's really what went down. Oh, and JT, I don't know, man. I really don't. I don't say that just to dodge the question. At this point, I don't know because I'm not quite sure exactly where I would pick up the story. Would I pick it up, in Nam? Would I pick it up post Nam? So I'm not really sure as of yet. Maybe Charlie Hunnam.
Hi, Kurt.
Hi.
What's
your name?
I'm Victoria.
Hi, Victoria.
We watch your show in our college dorm. People think we're quite crazy by screaming about it.
Where do you go to school?
SUNY Purchase in New York. What is it like to work with such a talented group of actors, and more specifically, what is it like to work with your wife?
That's one of the perks of the job. It's Katey and I have the luxury of working together, and we've sort of figured it out by now, and it's great because it's a very hectic schedule. Like I'm, and I don't say this, in complaining. It's just the reality of it's like I'm working 75, 80, 90 hours sometimes a week, and so I'm not around. Like I have to reintroduce myself to my family. At the end of the season. And, so if we didn't really work together, we probably wouldn't see each other as often as we do. So that's a perk. And I love my cast. They're all fucking nuts. And, we're just like this big, insane, dysfunctional family, and everyone's got their personality issues. But the great thing is, they all love each other, and they all give each other shit. And that, to me, that camaraderie really comes across on screen. The thing I learned, one of the biggest lessons I learned on The Shield was, and Sean and Scott Brazil really worked hard to do this, was creating the environment where people felt safe, people felt supported, so that they could show up, and if you give them the tools, if you give them good material, that they'll show up and they'll actually enjoy coming to work. And that's across the board, actors, cast and crew. And that really, if you're able to do that, I believe that really translates onto the screen. You can tell when people have chemistry. You can tell when guys are having fun together. And these guys fucking love each other, and they ride together. And that's that's something you can't create. You really have to. You really have to sort of give them those tools to do that, and it's the biggest lesson that I learned, and we've been able to do that, So I'm really, I'm lucky in terms of all of that.
All right, well, that's going to do it for tonight. Everybody join me in thanking our guest this evening, Kurt Sutter.
I think my intent with Tara was always that sort of the education of an old lady, and Gemma really being her coach and mentor to a certain extent, and really showing the evolution of Tara, at least over those first 5 seasons, of her slowly becoming, closer and closer to perhaps what Gemma had become, and so in playing out that arc, you have to throw it up against, Jax, and how would Jax respond to that, and how would she use those skills to protect herself, and that's really what she's doing now, is essentially learning everything, or using everything that she's learned from Gemma to, and apply. And, it was just like watching a movie in the hood. They were just, kill that bitch! It was just sort of like, so it really, I was like, oh, okay. Perhaps, so there's, but I do think that there are people like yourself that, beyond the betrayal of it, I think there's that sense of, absolute sadness that this person is being driven to such extreme measures to protect herself and her family. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. To see her unravel that way and become that person is really quite sad.
Here's what I want to know, though. Why doesn't she say to Jax, your mom helped kill your dad, basically? Like, when is that shoe going to drop? And why isn't Gemma more nervous that it will?
Yes, I'm always somewhat surprised at the extreme reaction of the fan base, because you don't have that awareness when you're in the process of putting it out there. So you don't really think, okay, how is this going to land or how is this going to be perceived? You just sort of try to move through with organic story. And, and it's hard for me because no matter what my characters do, I always feel like I have them rooted in some sense of humanity and understanding. So when we, by example, we did this screening in New Jersey last night for this Sandy benefit, So we watched episode 10, which will air this Tuesday, with, like 1,500 screaming New Jersey fans.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome this evening's guest moderator from New York Magazine, Katey Greco, and tonight's guest, Kurt Sutter.
I'm so glad you're all so happy to see me. Hi. Thank you for doing this, Kurt.
My pleasure. Thank you.
So we're 9 episodes into season 6.
Yes, we are. Yeah.
Tara has spent this entire season so far deceiving Jax. Jax finally knows about it. What I want to know is, did you always know from the beginning of the show that you were going to pull this couple so far apart? And if so, does that mean you think that they're incompatible ultimately?
Wow, that's really deep.
I'm getting deep.
I was just expecting 50 Shades of Grey questions, so that's all I'm really prepared for. Now, them to her own circumstances, which is, okay, I feel threatened, I'm not sure what to do, how do I protect my family? And now I need to go to those extreme measures to do that. I think the biggest struggle for both of them in all of this is the fact that they do love each other, and I think the betrayal and the heartache for both of them is knowing that they've been driven to this point of having to do this. Right. Tara feeling like, that it had to come to this, and Jax really feeling, to a certain extent, somewhat responsible for her being driven to that place. So,
and I'm glad you say that Tara felt like she had to do this, because I feel like I want to defend Tara. There are a lot of Tara haters right now. What do you say in response to them? Are they being fair? And I'm also curious how Maggie Siff, who plays Tara, has responded to the backlash.